Can we hold on just a second before the show gets started? I have this stabbing pain in my lower back. It's been coming and going for like years, and I don't know why. I didn't lift anything heavy. I didn't sleep on it wrong, I don't think. I wish I could just ask my back what's wrong with it so I could fix it and make it go away.
Well, go ahead.
I'm sorry, what now? Who's that?
It's me, the pain in your lower back. You don't remember me?
No.
Remember when you were a kid at recess and your classmate put you in a headlock? And when you told the teachers, none of them believed you?
What? No, I totally got over that. It only lasted a few seconds, and I wasn't even that hurt. He didn't even give me a noogie.
Oh, no. You didn't get over it. The despair of not being believed, of feeling vulnerable and disposable and small, and feeling rejected by your peers and teachers, that was too much pain to process as a little kid. And since experiences like that don't just evaporate, you tucked me right here in your back.
But, okay, if I had to hold on to you, why wouldn't I store you in my head or my neck? That's the obvious place, considering the headlock and everything.
Oh, that would be way too obvious. You needed to keep me somewhere more subconscious, so I could stay safe. But every now and then, I need to remind you that I'm still here. And just like the teachers didn't listen to you, you don't listen to me. And that's why it hurts so much, for the both of us.
Whoa. I'm really sorry. How can I help you? How can I help both of us to be free? And how can I stop this from happening in the future?
Well, I know a guy. Have you heard of Luis Mojica?
From Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford, this is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. Luis Mojica is a somatic educator and life coach. He uses various techniques to help people release damaging, pent-up emotions in their bodies. He's also trained in holistic nutritional counseling and herbalism, because you can't understand the body without understanding the stuff we put into it. Now, there are a lot of elements that make Luis, but we'll talk about how being born intersex is extremely influential in his work. We'll also cover how listening to emotional music affects our bodies, and how food can trigger a traumatic response. And if you think you don't have the time to take care of yourself, he's got some advice for you. Oh, and what if, instead of rejecting shame, we rejoiced in it? I asked Luis to start off our conversation by reading a post he wrote about consent that challenged many of his 200,000 followers.
I am consenting to non-consent. What does that mean? Some beautiful person walked up to me the other day and grabbed my arm to hug me and said, "I didn't even ask for your consent." And I said to her, "You don't need my consent." Then I sat with my answer for a while and learned what it meant for me. It means the awareness of human supremacy. The idea that I'm separate from the earth and that things shouldn't happen to me, that I shouldn't be uncomfortable, that you shouldn't offend me. For me, resilience and capacity and trauma healing aren't about having control over everything I experience. They're about being flexible. I have the freedom to say, "Don't touch me." I have the freedom to not be offended or to explore where the offense emerges from within me. I have the freedom to be surprised, annoyed, irritated, caught off guard, and uncomfortable without associating it with threat or injustice. I didn't have this freedom when I had PTSD. My body was like a jail cell, like a cage. I didn't know how to walk with it or sit in it. It was uncomfortable and everything felt like a violation. Everything. And then I got clear through this work and could somatically experience the difference between something feeling like a violation and an actual violation. And I'll even go as far as to say, I consent to violation. The universe doesn't care how I feel. I watch hermit crabs being thrown from rocks by waves in Costa Rica, and I jokingly say to my wife, "La mer don't care." It doesn't. The hermit crabs don't hate the waves, they don't sue them or picket against them. They flow with them. They are so non-victims and take it so impersonally that they have the resilience and flexibility to begin again. This is the practice for me of noticing and slowly composting human supremacy. I'm an animal. I'm part of this lawless earth. I'm one thread of this tapestry. Anything could happen to me. It's a miracle I'm even able to read this. I consent to non-consent, and when I truly walk and embody that, I'm free because I'm not assuming entitlement to peace. Instead, I'm alive with gratitude for the miracle of safety and pleasure moment to moment.
Thank you for reading that. One thing you said was, my body was like a jail cell, a cage. What do you mean by that?
Oh my goodness. I've had so many traumas early on that were body-based that by the time I was 12, 11, 12 is always the year I can remember. It's foggy as trauma goes, but it's much that I can remember of when everything just started to shut down. I couldn't feel anymore. And even the posture of my body, it felt like a bird cage, like it was like this hollowing out of my ribs and this concaved kind of mechanism, of my bones to encase my heart and my viscera and my nerves and everywhere I felt. It encased it so I couldn't feel to protect it from the world because the world just felt so scary. And I lived in that physiology for so long, probably till I was 28, 29. So it was a good 18 years. Yeah, 18 years, but it felt like a much longer time.
The original reason why I wanted to talk to you was I started following you a long time ago when I started going through a incredibly scary and sad time in my life. And I was looking for people on social media who had love to share and insights and wisdom to share. And I'd been following you for a long time. And then I saw that you had posted about having top surgery. And I thought, oh, I didn't realize that Luis was trans. And then I looked into it and found that you were born intersex. I'd like to hear about when you realized you were intersex.
There was always a relationship to my body that I had. Like I was born with little breast buds because I had so much estrogen when I was born. So there was already like a softness in my chest that no other boys had. But I didn't think about it. It wasn't even a thought, but I felt it. Like I felt my femininity. I felt my feminine body. And I think it was fifth grade because that's the year I remember being made fun of for having breasts. And that was the year my breasts started developing. And a lot of the girls in my class, some of them went through earlier puberty and they started developing. I noticed I'm developing like them. I'm not doing the thing these boys, I'm not getting leaner, I'm not getting more aggressive, I'm not getting like chiseled. It just wasn't happening. And every year that went by, it just wasn't happening until 11th grade. It was a really delayed puberty because of the kind of intersex expression I had. It's an estrogen dominance. Some intersex people have ambiguous genitalia. That's what we call the full expression. I didn't have the full expression. I have a partial expression, so it's just hormonal. And so my hormones, for whatever reason, doctors still don't even fully understand it because I have testicles, I don't have ovaries, but my body is more estrogen dominant, so it has more estrogen than testosterone, and it goes back and forth. So what I eat, how I'm feeling, different experience, the moon cycles. I can feel when I'm more estrogenated, I get softer. And then I can see when have more testosterone. But it was around those years where I realized, oh, my body's different from the other boys.
In a podcast, you had described it as a downward spiral that started at the age of 11. You said you had stopped taking off your shirt. You faked asthma attacks during swimming, and you covered yourself. You concealed yourself, which sounds a lot like you felt shame. Is that right?
Oh gosh, absolutely. I've come to learn that shame is a protective mechanism. I always thought it was a state or an identity, and it can become that. But it's meant to be something short term to hide yourself from getting hurt. And so I definitely went into a shame spiral because in my mind, and it was somewhat true, if someone saw my body, I would get hurt. Because I had so many sexual violations and was so bullied and so outwardly hated by the boys in school that there was just this connotation that, well, no one can know this because I don't ever want to get hurt again. So I just went into my absolute practice and devotion was how can I hide that I have these breasts? How can I hide my hips? How can I hide any femininity that moves through me? It was like an internalized misogyny. Hated any part of me that had feminine attributes.
How do you go from feeling that way to even like I know when I tell the stories about things that have hurt me, depending on my state of mind and who I'm talking to, no matter how long it's been, I find maybe my voice shakes a little bit and I can hear it. And I think, oh, it's so obvious I haven't completely let this go. But so how do you go from feeling that way to not only being able to talk about it with a sort of clarity and calm and acceptance, it sounds like, but helping other people get through their own stuff. What could you talk about that turning point if there was one?
Oh, yeah, no, there was. I lived for a long time dissociated from those parts of my body. And then to successfully dissociate from those parts, I had to dissociate from memories connected to those parts, right? So I forgot about the violations. I didn't think of that as happening to me. Some of them I remember them as dreams until later in therapy it came through as, wow, this actually happened. So I lived that way until 27, 28, 29, somewhere around there. And my wife's an astrologer, so she's like, your Saturn return years, of course. And so it was right during those years where I went to the dentist, and the most profound thing happened. I was getting dental surgery, and my tooth broke, and he hit a nerve, which is horribly painful if anyone's ever experienced that. The Novocaine didn't take, so it was like straight drill to nerve, you know? And so the shock went from my jaw all the way down to my gut. And the pain in my gut triggered the memory of sexual violation. And it was so visceral that I felt in that moment at, let's say, 29 is I think what happened. 29 years old, I felt in my body what happened when I was 10, 11, and 12. And so suddenly this connection happened. It was almost like a puzzle piece, like I was awakened to the visceral memory. I had some cognitive, fogginess of it, but visually I could feel the pain that was still in these parts of my body from holding this that I couldn't feel because I was numbed out when it was happening. That's what changed everything because that sent me to therapy. And I went year after year after year until I found a somatic therapist. And she was the first one that said, as I was telling my story, pause right there. She interrupted me, which no one ever did before. I used to just spin out for an hour and have an anxiety attack, and I would never be paused because no one was trained in somatics. And she paused me and said, where do you feel that when you tell me that? I'm like, I never was asked where I feel something when I'm talking about it. Well, my stomach, it's killing me. And after a couple sessions, I started learning how to physically feel where I was in the room now while I'm talking about something that happened then. And it completely, I get chills when I think about it, completely changed my life. Because every time I thought about it, or an intrusive thought came in, like a flashback, or I was telling a therapist, my entire body would go back to that moment. And I'd be so overwhelmed with charge and pain and anxiety. But now when I tell you, I'm like looking at you, I'm feeling my adult body. I know I'm in this room. It's like I'm talking about a movie I saw. And it's not in a dissociative way. It's like I'm not there right now, so I can talk about it clearly.
When you would put your hand on your stomach or your throat or your heart or wherever that pain was, it makes me think about Michael Singer, the author of The Untethered Soul, among other books. And he really focuses on letting go. First acknowledging that you're having experience where you remember something that was painful. As you know, you remember it and then you shove it down and then it stays or it comes out in weird ways and it just never works to shove it down. But when someone says, let it go, I'm sure you, like me, like everybody thinks, oh, great. Well, yeah, I'd love to let it go. What do? Do I sign some sort of piece of paper and have it notarized? Do I do some sort of incantation? How the hell do you let anything go? And Michael Singer talks a lot about, well, how do you let it go? And one of the things he says is that it went into you with pain and it's going to come out with pain. And so this idea of acknowledging and finding, even just being aware in the first place of where in my body am I feeling this? And then what? How do I work it out? Because when you do access it, it's still painful. So I'd love to hear when you would identify that pain, then what?
Yeah. So that, again, this is what somatics gifted me. So I should say before learning somatics as a patient or a client and then being trained in it, I spent years with the practice of animism, which, animistic practices are rooted in almost every indigenous culture on the planet, a lot of spiritual modern cultures as well, and or modern philosophies. But animism is the understanding that everything's alive. So everything has its own life force, everything has a spirit, everything has a purpose. Even the horrible things, they're all beings. And we have the opportunity to relate to them because they're alive. When I started learning about somatics, and these parts would wake up, like the pain, like it came out the way it went in, and it totally did. That's a great way to put it. Sensation for me is animistic. It's a being. It's not me. And so I had this understanding already just intellectually. And then when I learned and practiced somatics, I realized, oh, the pain that's coming, it's coming through me, but it's not mine. I'm not anxious. There's anxiety in me, a very slight shift, but a big one. And so it gave me this ability to witness the pain instead of be the pain. And I didn't fear it. Because when you fear it, your body starts constricting against it, then it can't move. It gets exiled in like the rib cage or the shoulder because you're clenching. But when I didn't fear it anymore, my body opened, it was able to move really quickly. So I found relating to the pain as if it's a being itself helps me not identify with it, and I can witness it and it moves through me pretty easily.
After you had your top surgery and you looked down at your chest for the first time, what in the world did that feel like for you?
Well, the first time was shocking because it was so bruised and flat. So shocking that it's flat, shocking that it's bruised because I wasn't prepared to what to expect or what to see. It was amazing because it happened 6 years before that dental experience. So I still was completely repressed. And that was part of what was so amazing was I got the top surgery, had this like beautiful male chest, yet I didn't feel free in my body. My shoulders were still hunching to hide breasts. I got so good at doing that. I would still feel really exposed wearing a t-shirt and like anxiety, panic attack level just to be seen in a shirt. I was so dysmorphic still that when I looked in the mirror, I would still see breasts. So I barely ate. I would run a lot. I was like kind of anorexic and wasn't really taking a lot of calories to get as thin as I could to get rid of any little fat remaining. So it was a powerful experience because it initiated me into realizing, oh, I got rid of the one thing, the story that told me I'd be fine after this happens. It happened and nothing went away. Everything I had been doing stayed. And that was where the somatic piece came in. I'm like, how is this not going away when it's actually gone? Oh, because my bones and my cells still remember and think they have to keep doing it, you know? So visually speaking, I was very happy. But when it comes to the somatics and the relationship to my body, nothing changed until I did the somatic work.
That reminds me of Maxwell Maltz, the author of Psychocybernetics. He was kind of one of the earlier people who wrote about self-help, and he was a plastic surgeon who would do surgery on people, especially when they had had some sort of scars or because of accidents or whatever. And they would have these surgeries and they would come back and say, Dr. Maltz, I know that you did this surgery, but I look the same. They wouldn't feel any better about themselves because, as you point out, it goes so much deeper than that.
That's right. I love knowing that now. I can bring such a beautiful practice to so many people that rely on surgery, whether it's medical, whether it's trans people, whether it's anyone that's just wanting to enjoy plastic surgery, whatever the situation is, they get to actually work with the nervous system and their relationship to their body in addition to the surgery. And it's such a more holistic experience and just changing a part and thinking it's going to change your life. It really doesn't. The relationship to your body is what changes your life.
When you're out and about and you just pass somebody by at the grocery store, what can you tell about a person by the way that they carry themselves?
Oh my gosh, there's so many stories the body tells, right? Now that I do this work so much. And I think what I learned the most is how much of their body is there. And what I mean by that is when someone is, and we can even check that out our own bodies right now, when we're sitting on these chairs, you kind of notice how much of me is touching the chair. And then those parts that are touching the chair, are they soft and kind of being held, or are they pulling up away? And this thing happens when you have PTSD, chronic stress as well, which can become PTSD. When you have PTSD, this thing happens where you're pulling away from your environment because your body's pulling you in on itself. It's like a collapse. So when I see people walking, talking, moving, and there's this pulling away from where they are, I'm seeing that their body isn't really in the room. And I don't ever really know unless I'm sitting with them, when I hear how they feel. But I've been playing with this for a while, and I'll just talk a little slower to them. I'll make a little deeper eye contact. I'll gently put a hand on their shoulder, and you start seeing parts of them enter the room. It's really amazing. But this is all subconscious. We don't know this unless we do this work.
And when you touch their shoulders, then you're kind of back to where we started, like this idea. Like if they winced, you'd be, I'm sorry, I should have asked. I don't know now.
I think if they went to be like, oh, sorry, I just wanted to touch your shoulder. I would check in with them. Would that feel like what happened there?
Well, that also makes me think about how, and back to that original thing that you read for us, when we leave our homes, or hopefully if our homes are safe places, we leave our homes, we walk out into this wild, unpredictable world. I've been thinking a lot about how every interaction with this world offers me an opportunity to prove that after all the self-help books and all the meditations and all the psychedelics and all the deep conversations and all the screaming into the void, all the work I've done, it's an opportunity to prove to myself that I am who I say I am.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't practice or teach this work from the place of getting there or being healed. And it's so easy to use those words. I used them for years when I was teaching this, but I've come to really understand more, like you're saying, that and this is why I wrote what I wrote, there's endless opportunities to be violated, destroyed, hurt, pleased, excited, shocked. I mean, endless in this lifetime. This is a really sensational world we live in. A lot happens. So for me, it's not about hitting this place where I avoid conflict or never get ruptured. It's having the ability to trust myself to navigate the rupture when it happens. And that's why, to me, the consent of non-consent is, oh, I can handle it now. I couldn't before, so I needed a lot of guidelines around my experiences. But now I have that capacity, just like you said, and each moment is an opportunity to kind of practice applying that.
It's funny. One thing that I have been committing to is when I feel my, as Michael Singer says, stuff get hit, I'm committed to not only acknowledging, oh, my stuff is getting hit right now, I don't like it, but letting it go and basically becoming like a hunter of these things that are getting hit and being ready and willing. And after I made this commitment to myself, I had a dream that I was with beings who were in charge of things or overseeing things, whoever they were. And they were saying to themselves, oh, she calls herself a hunter. Should we give her a big one to hunt? Like, should we give her some more? And in the dream, I'm like, no, you don't have to. It's fine. But then, and I remember the next morning, I still felt really tight in my belly about it. And I'm like, I don't want anything bad to happen to me or someone I love in case this was a prophetic dream. I don't freaking know. And then I remembered, no, I'm a hunter of the things that are going to hit my stuff. And either I'm willing to do that or I'm not. And I want to be. This is what we're here for. And to your point, you're never done. It's what we're here to do.
Exactly right. We are never done. And I think knowing that, for some people, that can sound really horrible and exhausting. And I totally get that and respect that. When you have the tools, just like you said, when your stuff gets hit, when you have the tools to be with that, like my language, I call it self-relating. When I can relate to whatever gets hit, whatever comes up, then life is just this endless buffet of, what am I going to relate to today? Is it grief? Is it humiliation? Is it joy? Is it love? Is it turn on? I don't know. Like, what am I going to relate to today? And there's a humility in that.
That was Luis Mojica. He's a somatic educator, holistic nutritional counselor, and life coach based in upstate New York. When we get back, do you ever think about what emotional music can do to and for the body?
You see that with fans. You see these people just like screaming and crying at the gate. That's a highly dysregulated body, Whereas if you're enjoying it and it's taking you into yourself, it's opening your heart, it's a more grounded experience.
I'm Kyone Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay with me. This is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. We're talking with somatic educator Luis Mojica. Somatic therapy focuses on the connection between mind and body. And if you look Luis up on his socials at Holistic Life Navigation, you would get the gist of what he does in clips like this.
Our bodies are so kind that they'll even store trauma to their detriment until we're ready to handle it. Which means a traumatic event occurs, a storm brews inside of me, my body packages that storm up and puts it into my shoulder, and it lives there like this for decades. For me, it lived in my shoulders like this for 2 decades. When you start learning how to speak the language of your body, Your body gives you that package via sensation, emotions, memories, desires, movements, so many ways it comes through the body. And then that charge metabolizes, and that place in your body is now liberated from the energy, the constriction, the exhaustion of holding this information back from you, because now you have capacity to be with it.
In addition to being a somatic educator, Luis is also trained in holistic nutritional counseling. And now we all know that food plays a role in how we feel. We eat crappy, sugary food, we feel crappy. Eat wholesome, nutritious food, and we feel better. We got it. So what is it about food that Luis is interested in?
The intersection of food and trauma are really not explored whatsoever. There's a few of us exploring it. Food and well-being, food and illness, all that. But food and trauma isn't talked about very much. What we know is that trauma is not mental. It's not even event-based, meaning it's not the event, it's the body's response that makes it trauma. And we see this. You see people that live through war, people that live through the World Trade Center collapse, people that live through all these experiences, and some emerge with PTSD, some didn't. So you can't say an event is traumatic. You can say it is when you know how the person responded. I'm saying all that because trauma is biological, and it largely affects your adrenals and your nervous system and your brain, right? So what we don't explore enough with that is, how does food instigate and replicate a trauma response? And it does. So if I wake up in the morning and I'm rushing to work and I'm having like a typical rushing to work breakfast, which is either nothing but coffee or coffee and like a pastry, let's say, that meal, and I'll just say this short version because it's very biochemical, but the short version is that meal revs up my adrenals, creates more adrenaline, and puts me into a biochemical fight or flight. So nothing can be going wrong with my day. I can have a beautiful life, totally safe, yet my internal state is having a trauma response to the food I ate. Now, take in someone who has PTSD. This is someone that has extremely exhausted adrenals. They have a very overworked brain, very overworked nervous system. They can't afford anything pushing that system anymore. But every time they have certain food choices or certain food types themselves, they're going to up their adrenal output. And now, conversely, like you were saying, wholesome foods, there are wholesome foods that I call the balancers. These foods don't make the adrenals work hard. They let the adrenals feel how they feel. So these are the foods, when you eat something, they don't change your emotional state. You just feel how you feel. Maybe you feel a little tired, maybe you feel a little tender, but they give you capacity to be with whatever you're going through. Whereas coffee, desserts, pastas, really heavy things or really activating things, they either depress your system or activate your system. So if you're working with a group of people, which I started doing the last 12 years, working with people who have PTSD through the lens of trauma, you see a huge effective rate, much better recovery rate within weeks. I mean, not even years, just because their internal state is no longer replicating a biochemical adrenal response as if they were in a war zone. So when you change the food, the inner state has more capacity to then deal with what comes up at therapy. So they're extremely interrelated. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's land trauma, cultural trauma. There's so much that comes with factory farming. I mean, it goes so deep, but I'll stop there and see how that lands for you.
What do you eat for breakfast?
Two things. So at this point, I'll do intermittent fasting because there is a way to consciously fast and not wreck your adrenals. Or I have a bean-based breakfast. So it'd be like eggs, beans, broccoli.
How do you feel about onions?
Absolutely fantastic.
Oh, thank God. I really love onions. I have this lotus tattoo on my wrist, and there's an onion growing out of it, is how much I love onions.
Onions are actually really good for your nervous system. Maybe that's why you're attracted to them, right?
That explains everything. That's why I'm so healthy, mentally and physically and emotionally. Speaking of diets, I want to talk about musical diets. Follow me on this. You and I both share a deep love and reverence for the highly emotionally charged music of Tori Amos.
Oh, can we just talk about that for the rest of the
show? I'm getting emotional just thinking about Tori Amos. She was the first musician that meant everything to me. I first heard her music when I was 13 in 1993, which is a great time to discover such a powerful artist. And when I think about Tori Amos, I also think about my first love, who was the person that brought Tori to me. And so that first love, as you can imagine, at 13 was both beautiful and grand. I grew up a gay kid thinking I was the only gay kid on the planet. And all of a sudden, this beautiful woman loves me and wants me. And the soundtrack is Tori Amos and Winter and Crucify and Silent all these years. And so in the beginning, it was beautiful. But then as things do, it ended and it was crushing. And Tori was the soundtrack for that too. And so sometimes I wonder, still love Tori Amos and still deeply appreciate Tori Amos, but I wonder sometimes if that highly emotional music made my pain deeper and more severe than it would have been had I never woven it into my experience in the first place.
I love that question. I'm feeling that for myself when I think about my own explorations, with her work and other people's work. When I think of music, and I like how you call it a musical diet, because the vibrations, the lyric, the sounds, the content, all that has a somatic experience, right? So if we just consider that everything has a somatic experience, we can easily kind of just simply deduce that some music can like regulate your nervous system and calm it down and ground it, and other music can activate it. And I think music that's highly emotional, like Tori's, or especially her early albums, her first three, Boys for Pele, I think was the most emotional, like so visceral that I think it takes you to your viscera. And I think some people, when I discovered Boys for Pele, I was 16. I discovered it much later. So I was at a place where the visceral expression was liberating. For some people, the visceral expression was what we call co-dysregulating, where they're in so much pain and they're looking for someone else who also is in pain and they're just reflecting pain to pain. That's where I think you're headed to here with that question. That can make things much more difficult to be with. Whereas if you're in a lot of pain, you're reflected by someone that isn't, that's a co-regulation and you have more capacity to not stay in the pain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it also makes me think about how, and this goes, I'm sure everybody listening to my story about Tori has their own Tori, their own version of it. And it also makes me think about when I listen to Silent All These Years or Winter or Professional Widow or Cruel or any of her masterpieces.
I was thinking Professional Widow when I said visceral.
Yeah. Cue Professional Widow. When anybody thinks about music that had that role in their lives, years and years and years, decades later, when you listen to it again, it almost acts as like how far have I come sort of gauge, right? Like if I listen to those songs now, there will always be feelings. But now I could be like, oh, I can listen to this and my heart skips a little bit of a beat, but I'm okay.
That's right. What you're saying right there is just like that question you asked me in the beginning of how can I say these things I experienced and seem like I've accepted them. Same difference. You're being reminded of a time in your life, but it's not now. So there's capacity now for what you're hearing or seeing or listening to. Whereas at the time you might have been really at capacity and it was just pushing you more over the edge. And you see that with fans, especially older, like the 90s and before, you see these people just like screaming and crying at the gate. That's a highly dysregulated body, Whereas if you're enjoying it and it's taking you into yourself, it's opening your heart, it's a more grounded experience.
It's obvious that you've pondered yourself in this world really thoroughly, that's something that you make a practice of doing. And Audacious producer Jessica Severin de Martinez wondered, what is a question you would love to be asked that nobody has ever asked you?
Ooh, what a question. I want to ask you that question for yourself while I think. Maybe you'll inspire me if you want to. Do I have your consent?
I see what you did there, Luis. Oh, wow. That is a hard question. Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah, Jessica. Let's see how fun it is for you, Jessica. Can you answer it?
Yeah. Oh, God. One question that I heard recently that I sort of stored but didn't pursue was, what compliment do you wish you would get more often?
Ooh, I like that one. That one's fun.
I would like to hear that I am beautiful, like drop dead gorgeous, because I grew up being bullied, being called ugly. I look like a boy, which doesn't necessarily mean I'm ugly, but like because I knew since kindergarten that I was only attracted to girls, none of my crushes ever wanted me back. And so it was really ingrained in my head at a very young age that I was not physically desirable. And so, yeah, it would be nice to hear, especially from someone that I was attracted to, that I am beautiful. What about you?
See, I'm gonna twin you. I'm gonna go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want someone to be like, Luis, you are hot. You are so gorgeous. You turn me on so much. And it's like I get that with my partner. And I think there's a part, again, I could care less when I think about it. When I play with that part, there's that part that was so brutally picked on and bullied and hated and like ugly compared to the standard. So just for that part to hear how beautiful it is, gorgeous. He would love to hear, "Oh, you're so beautiful." That feels exciting for him to get that admiration.
Okay, so then I wonder, what do we do with that? Like, have you heard of the author Carolyn Lovewell? She's the author of Existential Kink.
Oh, she's a good friend of mine.
Yes, I just finished reading her book a couple weeks ago. Here's what I think she would suggest based on what we've been saying. So she's saying that if there's shame, like I feel shameful that I care about whether or not anybody finds me physically attractive, because it really shouldn't matter, because it's on the inside that counts and my insides are awesome. But I think what Carolyn would say is it's one thing to be like, I accept that I have this desire and I accept my shame. I accept it. She would say, I think literally she said in her book, that's weak sauce, this acceptance. She would suggest that we take that shame of wanting to be desired and feeling ugly otherwise. I think she would say, take that shame and find a way to literally be turned on by it.
So her and I really twin around camp and filth culture. And so thinking of John Waters, and that's exactly why, that's what he did his whole career was he took all the misfits, including himself, and he always said that his best friends and the people that watch his films are the misfits that don't fit in with their own demographic, which has always been me. And so I always felt very seen by that. But all of his films are like this amazing altarpiece of this like ritual ceremony of we don't fit in. Let's get off on how disgusting we are. And they all have a blast being ugly and filthy and dirty and disgusting and rude and like all the things you would feel really bad about. He just went out. And when you meet a lot of these people that were in his films, they are so timid in real life and like so gentle and so meek, but they got to act out that existential kink. They got to get off on the thing that they were hated for, or they hated themselves for. So it'd be fun, I'm speaking for both of us, but if I think about this, it's fun to like, let's get off on how ugly I was. Like, let's enjoy how no one wanted to look at me and no one wanted to touch me, how great it was to be that powerful that I would repel people in the hallway. There's a power to it. And I've done that work and it's been super liberating. So now I can have fun with, oh, and there's a power to be like, and I want to be really hot. And I want someone to think I'm attractive and having fun with the whole experience, but not identifying with it. It's like it's your drag.
Oof. You're hearing from somatic educator and life coach Luis Mojica. After the break, we'll consider other ways of evaluating and liberating responsibilities.
Most of the things that exhaust me are not what I need to do. They're what I'm thinking I should do. I get this instant permission to release it.
I'm Kyone Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay tuned.
I've been raising up my hands, drop another nail in. Just what God needs, one more victim. Why do we crucify ourselves every day? I crucify myself. Nothing to do is good enough for you.
This is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. If you've ever wondered how much the body holds and communicates our feelings, you're listening to the right show. We're talking with Luis Mojica. His life's work is helping people understand how they store trauma in their bodies, how to release that pain, and when stuff inevitably gets hard again, how to handle it better. Let's get back to our conversation. You feel to me so centered, which makes sense considering the work you've been devoting yourself to for so long. What, if anything, makes you irritable? Do you have any pet peeves at all?
Oh yeah. So I'll tell you my number one pet peeve is clutter. It is like boss level in this lifetime for me. Now, someone else's clutter, care less. It's if it's in my space, like an environment that I'm living in or navigating in or having to work in, it's like so biological. Like my brain can't even function in the room. I'll just go into this overwhelm. And then when things are organized or tidy, no problem. So clutter is, I would say, my number one trigger in this lifetime.
And so, a la Carolyn Lovewell, when you feel triggered because of the clutter, my imagination goes to, well, you probably clean it up. Like you probably set things right and make it so it's appropriate for you. But do you ever sort of roll around in the, I'm so irritated by this clutter. It's so frustrating. What are people thinking?
It's interesting. So I went through this period when I lived in this town called Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I was going to college for photography, for film. And it was a very special time in my life. I was 19 to 21. I lived there. So it was 2 years. And my best friend at the time was extremely messy, like the messiest person I've ever met. If you're listening to this, Colin, I love you. He knows it. He's cool with it. And I remember thinking, I'm going to give in to this. I'm going to be even messier. And I was like filthy for 2 years, like messy, filthy, like broken furniture. I mean, insanity in my house. And I loved it. It was so fun. It was so exciting. It was so enlivening. And, I have this ego story like, okay, I did it. I don't have to do it again. It's probably bullcrap. I know I have more to do there. But yeah, good point. I should practice like kissing it or licking it or rolling around it or eating it. Whatever it is.
You are such a busy human being. You have your podcast, Holistic Life Navigation. You run many weeks-long workshops. You have free bi-monthly circles to explore somatic roots of addiction. We had to wait 4 months to do this interview because you got so much on your plate. What rituals do you have in your life to take care of yourself?
Honestly, it's so my life. It used to be like moments that, okay, I got to step out and go into the self-care and step back in. It's so interlaced now. It's like if I'm doing a retreat, like this happened last year, I was in the middle of a retreat and I felt my body doesn't want to be on the stage talking right now. And I said, let's all lay down for 15 minutes. And we all laid down, 15, like 60 people, all just laid there, close your eyes. And it gave me all this capacity to stand back up and teach and do really good work. I just needed a break. And it seems so simple, but in the past, I would have never, that would have been mortifying to admit I was tired and to even do it. I would have thought everyone's going to leave. No one's here for this. But everyone else needed it too, it turned out. And so we had this beautiful moment of like intimacy and silence and feeling what came up. And then we worked with it as a group. So it's just one example of it's so fluid now because I really, truly listen to my body. And when it's at its edge and it's like, stop, I let it stop. And I have the privilege of doing that. I didn't. There were many years I was very poor. I didn't work for myself. I did not have the privilege of saying stop. I had to push my body. And there were times where I didn't. I stopped my job and I was on assistance for months, So I've had different experiences. But now it's like, while I can, I'm going to listen to it as much as I can, really practice it. And it's what I do for a living. So it kind of gives me, I have like a pass. I have like a hall pass to be really.
People will be like, Luis wants me to stop and breathe. Well, of course he does. Look what he does. So for people who are listening to this and they are on their way to sports practice and doctor's appointments and kids and stuff and things and their wiring and their trauma and they're like, yeah, I would love to stop my day for a second and take some deep breaths, but is that even going to help? And how do I even remember to do it? And I feel overwhelmed even just thinking about taking care of myself. What do you say to them?
Oh my gosh, there's so much. Really exploring what you have to do and what you think you should do. That has been a long journey for me. And to learn, wow, most of the things that exhaust me are not what I need to do. They're what I'm thinking I should do. And to just really get that not just hear it intellectually, but to feel it in my bones, like when my body says, this isn't necessary and it hurts me. I get this instant permission to release it, right? If most people listening to this just did what they actually needed to do to survive, we would have so much more capacity. So it's like the first thing. And I'll just say one more thing. It's just getting still and letting yourself be held. Self-care sounds like a thing to do. And in American culture, especially, it's like this big thing. You have to save up money, you have to go to a retreat, you have to go on vacations, these really big things. But it can be as simple as you're driving home and you pull into the driveway and you, for 2 minutes, you set your alarm and you just let your head be held by the car seat. That's it. The headrest of the car seat. Just let your head be held and you feel your arms and your shoulders relax and you look around and you let your body see what's pleasant, what's beautiful, and you breathe. It's literally that simple. And then you'll notice something shifts in you and you suddenly have more capacity to then go home and do the dishes or make food or take care of kids or work on your project, whatever it is.
Plus, you factor in how much time we spend scrolling through social media. I mean, as long as we stop at your page. But every time I think I don't have time to fill in the blank, I remember, no, I just spent 48 minutes on Reddit.
That's it. And that's what I loved when I used to do coaching. I did a lot of one-on-one coaching around this exact thing. The amount of people that would come in and the lists they would make of things they do every day, 1 out of 40 things were actually necessary to their survival. And it would shock them. They would start taking a little off at a time. They had all these hours to the day. They saved money. It was just incredible.
One thing I really would love to hear the story of is you have 3 dots that you draw on your forehead, starting a little bit above the center of your eyebrows. I'd love to hear the story of them.
So one day I was in the bathroom and I was getting ready. I looked at my face and for the first time ever, I'm like, something looks weird. Like, what's wrong with my face? And my best friend and roommate at the time was an amazing painter. And she had this little thin paintbrush next to his terracotta acrylic. And I dipped the end of the paintbrush, like the wooden tip, into the acrylic and just put the dot on my forehead. And I was like, everything looks normal now. It was like this moment where, okay, yeah, that's what I look like. And from that point on, I started doing it pretty much every single day. And I would feel this sense of center, this sense of self, this like belonging that I couldn't even name. It was so felt sense that I had no name for it. And of course, everywhere I go, what's that mean? What's that? I don't know. I don't know what it means. And then it's only very recently that I was working with doing a lot of ancestral work with certain elders. And I learned that these 2 lineages I come from would do the exact same thing. So now I have this context that, okay, it's an ancestral memory that came through. But for so long, it just felt so good and so right. So I followed the feeling.
Follow the feeling.
Yes.
Luis Mojica, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you, love. It's been a pleasure.
We'll have a link to Luis's work at ctpublic.org/audacious. This show is always so lovingly produced by Jessica Severin DeMartinez, Meg Fitzgerald, Robin Doyon-Aiken, and Meg Dalton at Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford. Very special thanks to Sophia Martinez. She played the role of my lower back pain in the intro, and for someone who is so kind and funny and thoughtful, to play the part of pain was truly a tour de force of acting, so thank you so much for sharing your talent, Sophia. If you like this episode, check out the one we did featuring intersex activist Pigeon Pagonis. They talk about how they confronted the hospital that did non-consensual surgeries on them to make them appear feminine, and got that hospital to change their policies on how they treat intersex children. We've got that episode for you at ctpublic.org/audacious and wherever you get your podcasts. You can stay in touch with me on the socials at Kyone Wolf, and you can always send an email to audacious@ctpublic.org. Thank you for listening.